You're going to prison in a few days. How long is it until you go away?
So I was ordered to report to self-surrender on December 19th.
I'm so sorry that this happened. I hope this unsettles people enough that they really start to think differently about the importance of privacy and what's currently at stake, and better understand the war against privacy that's currently going on.
Absolutely. And it is a war against privacy. People do need to understand that.
So you're an ordinary person. You don't need privacy right now because what have you got to hide? Maybe one day in the future you might need privacy if there's a bad government in power targeting people like you or something, but you can just start protecting your privacy then, when you actually need it, right? Actually, no. In the future, privacy might not be possible anymore. Because right now, people all over the world who are building the privacy tools that you might one day depend on are being arrested and thrown in jail. And governments are smearing the very right to privacy, arguing that innocent people don't need it, that privacy is only for criminals. The truth is, privacy is about human dignity. And if you don't want your children to grow up in a world where privacy has been outlawed, you need to start paying attention now, before it's too late.
So let's start at the beginning. I want to know a little bit about your background.
My name is Keonne Rodriguez, and I developed and co-founded Samourai Wallet. It goes all the way back to when I got my first computer when I was probably 10 or 11 years old. Pretty immediately, I was hooked on creating websites for things I was passionate about. So I've always loved computers and loved the web. I wasn't very good at school, and eventually I dropped out of high school at 16 to pursue a career with computers. And I was largely successful. I was building websites for people and organizations, and it was perfect.
What kind of websites were you creating?
It's a little embarrassing. But again, I was about 10 or 11, and I had recently gone on a trip to the Italian Alps. My grandmother took me there. In the Italian Alps, they're really into gnomes, little fantasy gnomes. And I thought they were really cool, and I decided to build a website. The first website I built was a website about all the different subspecies of gnomes. And I put it out there, and I thought it was great, and it was great. I did a lot of stuff. I created the website for the Miami Beach chapter of the United States Life-Saving Association. I worked with a music label for a Thai artist who was huge in Thailand and was trying to break in the United States, so I created his web presence.
Keonne's bread and butter was user-facing websites. That's how he paid his bills. And he was good at it.
What was it about computers that really got your interest?
It was very endearing to me that I could make what was in my head happen in reality, or virtual reality at least. And I would have to learn the skills to make that reality appear on the computer. So it was always a constant challenge. And then the second thing I think is the social level. I didn't have a lot of friends in person at school or even when I left school, but I had a lot of people online in chat rooms who were my friends. And that was a really nice social aspect to it.
Maybe schoolwork wasn't something he was good at, but Keonne was really good at computers, and it became his biggest passion, until one day he got a new passion.
Do you remember the day that you learned about Bitcoin?
Yeah, sort of. I had been hearing about Bitcoin off and on from probably around 2010, but I didn't quite get it yet.
Today, Bitcoin is a household name, and whether you love it or hate it, we've all heard of it. But back in 2010, it was a different story. And when Keonne first started hearing people talk about it, like many of us, he dismissed it.
I mean, I think it's such a foreign concept that you can have a type of currency or money on the internet. There's just a bunch of uncertainty there, which I think still exists for the vast majority of people.
But to be fair, at the time, there was also a lot of uncertainty about the traditional financial system.
By 2007, I knew that there was something wrong with our financial system. I wasn't quite like an Occupy Wall Street person, but I knew they were onto something too. Like they could tell something was wrong. So I was already along those lines of thought that government money probably isn't the best, and there has to be something better.
2008, 2009, 2010, there were a lot of people who were pushing back against government financial system. Why was there a big movement around that time?
It corresponds with the quote unquote Great Recession in the US, where the big banks and hedge funds blew up the economy with the help of the government. And the government bailed them out and did not bail out individuals, clearly, but bailed out their friends in big business. The Occupy Wall Street folks, they saw that and said, hey, that's really messed up. They understood something was amiss here, something wasn't right with the economy and the way the financial system worked. I think people were becoming aware of it because it was too big to ignore. So that was kind of my initial foray into the idea that there has to be an alternative to what is known as the fiat system. Fiat means by decree. So the government decrees this currency into existence. So it has to be something better. And that's where I got into gold and silver. It was in the circles that I was running in where Bitcoin was first discussed, but I still didn't quite get it. I didn't understand this intangible currency, like I can't hold it. How's that going to work? And I didn't really put that much effort into thinking about it. So it really wasn't until probably 2012 where I started to understand the value proposition of Bitcoin. It was around the time that the Greek economy exploded.
And the run-on effects for neighboring Cyprus were severe.
Authorities started dipping into people's bank accounts and confiscating their savings. That was pretty shocking, even though it's something that you, in the back of your head, is is possible. You don't expect it. And I was like, well, you can't do that with gold. And then you realize, well, they did exactly that with gold. And I thought back to the gold confiscation in the US in 1933, I believe.
In 1933, during the Depression, the US government made private ownership of monetary gold effectively illegal and forced conversion into dollars, seizing these gold assets to make it easier for them to devalue the dollar and print money. Keonne wanted to see a money that couldn't be seized. So if a reckless government went bankrupt, they couldn't destroy the lives of everyday citizens by stealing their money.
I started to think, okay, well, maybe there is something to this Bitcoin thing.
But there was a second catalyst event for Keonne at the time: WikiLeaks. Around the world, governments pressured payment providers to block payments to WikiLeaks.
The government didn't overtly say, oh, you can't donate to WikiLeaks, right? Because that would be unconstitutional.
Right.
But they didn't need to. The corporations did it for them. Visa and MasterCard wouldn't let you. They stopped allowing donations to WikiLeaks. And that to me was unbelievable, right? Because these are two massive corporations telling you what you can spend your money on.
Whether you agree with WikiLeaks or not, allowing governments to decide which political causes or media publications or charities you are and aren't allowed to donate to is dangerous. And it almost destroyed WikiLeaks. That's when WikiLeaks started to accept donations in Bitcoin.
That, I think, sealed the deal for me. Right, I needed a way to be able to donate to the causes I wanted to donate to electronically without anyone in between saying I couldn't. And when I figured that part of the equation out, it was like, oh, that's what it's for. It's for making those types of payments.
They call it uncensorable money because it's decentralized. The protocol lives on thousands of computers all over the world. You could ban it, but in order to enforce the ban, you'd need to stop every single one of these thousands of computers from running it. Otherwise, the network will just keep going.
It was promised to be a censorship-resistant technology. There is no intermediary. It's you and the person you're sending Bitcoin to. And there's not a institution, financial institution, government, regulator, bank, anyone in between that transaction. No one can stop me from sending a transaction. Being able to do that is powerful. To me, that's tantamount to free speech. How you transact is speech. At that point, I got it and I was hooked. I realized that I wanted to go all in on Bitcoin. I find a job, getting paid in Bitcoin, earning Bitcoin, working full-time for Bitcoin at blockchain.info. It was the largest wallet in the world, had the most users. I was so proud to be able to work for them and impact Bitcoin so early on. I was their 8th employee.
That's where he met William Lonergan Hill.
So Bill worked with me at blockchain. At that time in Bitcoin, everyone kind of was on the same wavelength culturally. This is a technology that can really enhance human freedom, and we're going to do everything we can to build that out.
But in order to really enhance human freedom, it was missing a key component: privacy.
So Bitcoin is a pseudonymous system. It's not an anonymous system.
While censorship-resistant tech is powerful, if you can't use it privately, the state can still just target you and shut you down. If we want decentralized systems to stay censorship-resistant in the real world, we need the ability to use them privately.
At what point did you kind of make that realization that decentralized tech, in order for it to be effective, needs privacy?
Oh, almost immediately. Almost immediately. Everything that happens on Bitcoin is public. If I make a transaction, it's publicly recorded to what's called the blockchain. And the amount of the transaction and the from and the to of that transaction are public. In a normal Bitcoin transaction that you look at on the blockchain, there's really only one way to read it. The person on the left sent the person on the right X amount. Now, it doesn't say my name. It doesn't say Keonne Rodriguez paid Naomi 1 Bitcoin. It says my Bitcoin address and your Bitcoin address. And at the early days, that was pretty good. That was not too bad.
Because people thought that as long as you didn't publicly advertise that you're associated with a certain address, you could stay anonymous. But over time, it became clear that wasn't true. There are so many ways that your address can be traced back to your identity. For example, every time you send money to or from an exchange, it adds another way to link you to your transaction history.
Once Coinbase or whomever knows that Bitcoin address is yours, they can see what you do with it going forward. So even if you're using a new address every time, they can watch the blockchain and see what you're spending your money on and what your total net worth is, and all stuff that we would absolutely not find acceptable in traditional finance can be done on the Bitcoin network.
It's not just KYC on exchanges that reveals your identity. Your IP address reveals your identity. Your browser fingerprint reveals your identity. Goodness, the entire internet is a tracking machine. De-anonymizing your activity is a $1 trillion industry. It turns out it's easy to de-anonymize Bitcoin users. And this is incredibly dangerous for the user.
We would never accept the privacy trade-offs on Bitcoin in the real financial world. If I went to the Starbucks and bought a latte and handed the barista my card, and when I paid, she was able to see all my past transactions and will be able to see all future transactions and know my net worth, we would say that's insane. That's insane.
We're seeing this rise in what's known as a wrench attack. Not just roving gangs, but organized cartels now strategically going across the country targeting people who use Bitcoin.
How do they know who uses Bitcoin? Because websites, including exchanges, get hacked all the time. And these breaches expose the personal details of everyone using the platform.
And what gets breached is a client list that just has a name and a Bitcoin address. And all the attacker needs at that point is to look on the public blockchain, see that Bitcoin address, figure out which name is a worthwhile target, and go after them. And there's very little that anyone can do to stop it, right? So privacy is essential. Remember, we had been accepting Bitcoin for our salary for 3 years now, right? We had a legitimate need for financial privacy at this point. By 2015, it was a major problem that Bill, my partner, and I identified that something needed to be done. The internet had the potential to be this bastion of freedom, and it turned out to be a pretty big panopticon. And it's the same thing with Bitcoin, right? If we're not vigilant and careful, this technology that could be a bastion of freedom can turn into a surveillance hellscape. That's why we created Samourai Wallet, was because we saw it was moving that way, and we wanted to create software to combat that.
So Keonne and Bill decided to create a wallet that would give people the essential privacy that Bitcoin was lacking. What exactly was Samourai Wallet?
Samourai was designed and always remained what is called a non-custodial wallet, sometimes now referred to as self-hosted wallet, meaning that you, the user of Samourai Wallet, always retain full custody and control of your private keys. I can't steal your Bitcoin, right? You have full control of it, not me.
And how did Samourai give people back their privacy on a public ledger like Bitcoin?
Introduce so much uncertainty and doubt into a Bitcoin transaction that a observer who's looking at it publicly really can't make heads or tails of it. It's too complex.
There are different ways that you could do this. One way is by mixing a bunch of coins together.
Mixing back then meant you sent your Bitcoin to the mixer, and then you received Bitcoin back from the mixer. If you did that, then even if it was for a minute, you were giving up custody and control of your coins and giving it to the mixer and hoping the mixer would send it back to you. That's not how Samourai Wallet worked.
Samourai didn't use mixing. Instead, you were in charge of your money at all times. But what happened was you were grouped together with other people and you did a joint transaction together. You all had the same amount of Bitcoin, let's say 0.05 Bitcoin.
And each one of those inputs of 0.05 would be used in what is essentially a collaborative transaction between you and up to 8 other people, right? Who are all doing a 0.05 collaborative transaction, and they're doing it together. Now, the key part of this is it starts at an address they control and it ends at an address they control.
We talked about the Bitcoin blockchain before and what that transaction graph looks like, where it's very clear that the person on the left is sending money to the person on the right. Well, in one of these collaborative Samourai transactions,
when it's completed, it's 8 0.05 on the left-hand side and 8 0.05 on the right-hand side. And that becomes pretty difficult to determine the past history of the coins because it's all jumbled up. There's too many combinations of where it could have began. It was a pretty effective tool. Quite frankly, I'm really proud that we were able to release that technology and open source it and that it still exists today.
When this tool was released, it was a big deal. Now, everyday Bitcoin users had a way that they could better protect themselves. Goodness, even I talked about it on my show back in the day.
So Samourai Wallet, it's an app that's specifically designed to enhance privacy. They are really trying to clamp down on this fight against Bitcoin surveillance.
I'm a big fan of Samourai. I think they make a very good product, so I hope that more people use them. I hope they continue to do things good for our privacy.
Yeah, it was a big deal. It was a non-custodial privacy solution. It really wasn't super technical. You didn't have to be in the weeds on Bitcoin to use it. You just pressed a few buttons. It automatically routed through Tor. It automatically did best practices. It automatically did everything for you. You just had to have your phone on. First and foremost, we built Samourai Wallet for us, for Bill and myself. We needed it. We needed those tools, and no one else was building them. And it just so happens that what we needed, a lot of other people needed as well. I hope that it helped people. I know that it helped people in repressive regimes. I know that it helped people who would be considered dissidents by their governments. And I'm proud of that. I think that's quite a contribution to make to the world. We had a pretty active user in Iran. He was a legitimate user in a theocratic, authoritarian regime who made use of the privacy software that we created and would tell the world about it and tell his friends and family and compatriots in Iran about it.
This was probably the highest point of your life. You know, you're building what is super important software. You're contributing to a cause that's deeply important to you. And people are receptive. People are using this tool. They're talking about it. They're evangelizing it. And it's saving lives.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was. I couldn't think of anything else I would rather be doing than what we were doing at Samourai Wallet. I couldn't believe that we had actually made it work and made it happen, that we were able to be self-sufficient, to survive as an open source project and grow. And I was on top of the world. It was wonderful.
Samourai grew and grew for 10 years and was one of the very few tools that actually existed that helped people maintain the privacy of their balances, protecting them from revealing their entire financial history and net worth to the public. People understood that privacy wasn't suspicious, it was normal, and it was important.
So yeah, it was good times. On April 24th, 2024 at 5 a.m., everything changed. I woke up because my dog was barking, which my dog never does. Looked out the window and there were 40, 50, maybe more armed FBI agents surrounding my house. Lights started flashing. They got on the megaphone, said, "Keonne Rodriguez, come out with your hands up, you're under arrest." Repeating that message every 3 to 5 seconds. Again, this is 5 in the morning. My neighbors are waking up, everything is happening. Armored vehicles, drones, lots of firearms, and in the face of such overwhelming force, you have to comply. There's nothing else you can do. So, I walk out, hands up. My wife walks out. I see laser sights on her chest, on my back. I am placed under arrest, and I'm put into the back of a squad car. And from that point, information was scarce. They don't talk to you. They really don't. They don't say much to you.
They leave him sitting there for hours.
Did you know why they were there?
No, I didn't know really why. I mean, it could only be related to Samourai Wallet because I didn't do anything else, right? I didn't run like a drug empire. I didn't really even go out that much. All I did was work on Samourai Wallet. So I knew it had to be somewhat related. I was going through things in my head, waiting there in the back of the car. I was sitting there for several hours while they started searching my home. All I could think about during this time was, are they arresting my wife? She didn't do anything. Are they arresting my wife? Has Bill been arrested? Is anyone else arrested who is involved with the project? What are they taking from my house? Is my dog going to be okay? Everything was going through my head. They left the door open, so I'm thinking, oh my God, my cat's going to get out. I hope that she can get back in. It's funny. You think of pretty trivial things, even though it's a pretty massive, situation. And of course, just wondering what the heck is it they're here for? What did I do? I tried to get some information, but no one would say anything. So once I guess they were finished doing the initial search of my house, they moved me from the back of the local police car to a FBI car and drove me to the FBI field office, where they took my fingerprints and my DNA and all this sort of stuff. From there, then they took me to the jail at the courthouse, where I was to be held and wait to see a judge. While I was there, it was some amount of time. There are no clocks around anywhere, so time moves really strangely. But it was some amount of time before I was called to a room in the jail, and that's where I met the public defender who had been assigned to my case. And what a relief seeing someone who is on your side. These 6-7 hours, whatever it was, everyone has been against me. Everyone has thought I'm a criminal and that, I need to be in jail and all of this. And suddenly there's this person who's on my side. What a relief. And she's the one that had a copy of the indictment and told me for the first time what the charges were. She told me that the first charge was conspiracy to commit money laundering. And the second charge was conspiracy to operate an unlicensed money service business. And it was pretty flooring to me, to be honest with you. I knew, like I said, I knew it had to be something to do with Samourai, but in my head, it was like, oh, maybe a user did something wrong and they're, need to talk to me about, I didn't really know. But she said money laundering and money transmission. And I said to her, I said, how could I launder someone's money? I never had anyone's money. I would need access to their money to launder it. And she was like, well, it's a conspiracy charge. And they really don't need much to charge you with this on a conspiracy charge.
What's a conspiracy charge?
So if I would have been charged with money laundering proper, they would have needed to provide the person I laundered money for, right? They would need to bring someone forward who says, Keonne and I had an agreement to launder money. I paid him this amount and he laundered the money for me. And this is what he did with it. That person doesn't exist. So instead of that, they do this conspiracy to launder money. And the object of the conspiracy, according to the government, is I created software that money launderers could use. And the reason I created software was to launder money. That was the only reason why. And because I did that, that's the object of the conspiracy. That makes me guilty of conspiracy to launder money, because I engaged in an agreement, even if I've never spoke to them, by creating the software, that was the agreement to launder money.
Just so I get this straight, the government was arguing that the tool you created, its entire intent was just for ill-gotten gains. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's how they truly saw it. They truly saw it like that there was no legitimate reason for this software. And
no legitimate reason for privacy.
Yeah, they truly believe that. It's absolutely shocking how hostile to basic privacy the United States Attorney's Office is. Prosecutors see privacy as a stumbling block to their mission in prosecuting crime. So they're very hostile to it. All of the government's evidence against me in terms of proving my intent to create this money laundering tool comes down to tweets. Lots of jokes, lots of stuff that they took out of context. Anytime that a government or corporation did something that I recognized as authoritarian. So for example, the Federal Reserve banned all of its employees from trading Bitcoin. And I quote tweeted that news article and said, welcome new Federal Reserve employee Samourai Wallet users. And when Kuwait did something similar, welcome new Kuwaiti Samourai Wallet users. And when Russia was sanctioned during the war, welcome new Russians, Samourai Wallet, Russian oligarch users. And boy, did the US Attorney's Office go crazy about that one. They saw that and said, he's advertising to Russian oligarchs. That's his intent. That's criminal intent. We got him. And okay, if I was really advertising to Russian oligarchs, would it have been on Twitter in English? Are Russian oligarchs even really laundering their proceeds with Bitcoin, or are they doing it with property in Dubai and London and with artwork and with jewelry? They're not doing it with Bitcoin. But that's what they do. So they took those tweets and said, this is the intent to create a tool solely for the use of money laundering.
Was it smart to poke the bear? Probably not.
Yeah, it was, that's how I tweeted.
So why did he do it? Well, ultimately, he thought he was safe. This had been ruled by courts in the United States. Let me explain. It's actually not enough that Keonne knew his tools might be used by criminals. Of course he knew that. Everything can be used by criminals. Cars are used by criminals in bank robbery getaways, but that doesn't make car manufacturers liable. Smartphones are used to hack people's finances. That doesn't make Google and Apple accomplices in conspiracies to steal money simply because they know that this stuff happens. You have to be part of the crime.
We found case law going back to 1940 where a sugar distributor was charged with a conspiracy charge because he sold his sugar to a bootlegger who was making illegal alcohol, right? Because this was during Prohibition. Wow. And the government got him on a conspiracy charge, and the judges threw it out and said, there needs to be more than just knowledge of a criminal act. He has to be part of the crime. Pretty common sense. Judges threw that out. Then there was one in the 90s where a grow light manufacturer who made lights for greenhouses, was arrested and charged with a conspiracy charge because he sold to a marijuana dealer. And the government was like, hey, he's a part of the conspiracy because he sold knowingly to this marijuana dealer. They even took out an advertisement in High Times magazine, which is a marijuana enthusiast magazine. And they made a joke, God forbid, they made a joke with the guy and said, I don't even want to know what you're going to use this light for. And they got convicted at trial. And then that conviction got overturned on appeal because of the same concept. You have to have more than just a vague knowledge of the crime. You need to be part of the crime.
So Keonne really didn't think that his jokes put him in any danger.
There was a congressman out of Ohio, Warren Davidson, who had a great analogy about this case. He said, it's like prosecuting Microsoft because drug dealers make use of Excel.
Right.
The government's theory is that because we knew that it was possible for criminals to make use of our software, because we just had that knowledge, and that's all the knowledge we had, that made us part of a criminal conspiracy. It's not like we knew of a specific criminal conspiracy. It's not if we knew of a particular crime that was occurring and encouraged it. It was just the generalized knowledge that that could occur. And of course it could occur. We're not idiots.
Right.
We know that's going to happen.
So case law and a Supreme Court precedent was on their side. Just knowing that what they built could be used by some people for crimes isn't a crime itself.
So I was pretty confident. I mean, with Supreme Court precedent, the highest court in the land, that's pretty strong.
Then there was the other charge about being a money transmitter. This is where things get even crazier.
There's something called the Brady Rule in U.S. criminal procedure. And that rule says that the government has to turn over any evidence that is exculpatory, meaning that it's good for you, right? So if they have evidence that says, oh, maybe you didn't commit this crime, they have to give that to you. Well, in our case, they failed to hand over certain exculpatory evidence in this case for over a year, and only turned it over when we asked specifically if this evidence existed.
Wow.
A year before the prosecution, they reached out to FinCEN, the Financial Crime Enforcement Network, the regulator in charge of money transmission and preventing money laundering. And they asked the regulator, is Samourai Wallet a financial institution? And FinCEN responds to them and says, under our rules, they would not be considered a financial institution or a money transmitter because they don't take custody of anyone's funds. And FinCEN had rules in 2013 and 2019 where they reiterated this. So they told the government that. The government hid that information and indicted us anyway on unlicensed money transmission.
Wow.
And then, didn't give us that information. So no one thought that we were a financial institution, including the regulator in charge of financial institutions. No one thought it. It was an innovation at the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York of an overzealous prosecutor who said, let's get these guys. And they just made this up.
They said that there was this North Korean hacking group called Lazarus that used Samourai to launder funds.
That's what they claimed. And to further that, they claimed that we had a duty to perform KYC and AML to prevent that from happening.
KYC and AML stand for Know Your Customer and Anti-Money Laundering, and they're laws that were formalized under the Patriot Act, saying that financial institutions and money transmitters have to get identity documents from customers and prove their identity.
We had no obligation to do that because we're a non-custodial piece of software. We're not a bank. We're not a financial institution. We don't have those same obligations that a financial institution has. It was a pretty novel innovation from the Department of Justice to go after us, and that's why it took the whole industry by surprise that a non-custodial piece of software was being targeted this way and prosecuted this way. This had never been said before, that non-custodial software was now being considered a financial institution. By the Department of Justice. This is the first time this has happened. And how do they justify it? I don't know. They never did.
So the New York Southern District that prosecuted Keonne argued that Samourai had obligations to do things that money transmitters do, even though the regulator in charge of regulating money transmitters said Samourai wasn't a money transmitter and didn't have those obligations. And the Southern District argued that Samourai, as part of a conspiracy charge, were liable for what people who used their tool did, even though case law and Supreme Court precedents say otherwise.
So the government is just saying whatever they're saying to the grand jury in order to get an indictment. It's the prosecutor and the grand jury and a judge. You're not there, and there's no one there to represent you. You don't even know what's going on. So the government is just producing whatever evidence, and you're not allowed to know what was said, by the way, right? And then the indictment gets handed down, and then they come after you, they arrest you, they raid your house. I guarantee you, in that grand jury, they did not produce the evidence that FinCEN said we weren't a money transmitter. Guarantee it, but don't know for sure because they will never release the grand jury transcript to us. Getting an indictment is so easy. It's the prosecutor's greatest friend, just like a conspiracy charge, because they don't really have to prove anything. The deck is so stacked against a criminal defendant that it's absolutely unreal, right? They have the upper hand throughout the entire process. They have the credibility in front of the judge, right? The judge is going to automatically believe what the government says, even if they're not supposed to. That's just how it is. They do. The grand jury is going to believe whatever the government says. You're going to be looked at as a criminal, even though they haven't proven anything. And people are going to read the indictment and assume everything that's in that indictment is true, because why would the government lie? The whole process has been so absolutely eye-opening to me. I knew that we had a messed up justice system. Everyone kind of knows that, but you don't really know it until you're face to face with the Department of Justice. Then you understand. You read the indictment and you're like, hey, this is a bald-faced lie. They produced this chat log, but they cut off the first part and the last part, where there's all the context, and it's just one sentence, and they're spinning it this way. They know what it says. Why would they lie? It's not like, oh, the truth will come out in front of the jury, and the jury will, make the right decision based on all of the evidence. That's not how it goes.
But even with an indictment, there was hope.
When you went into this court case, were you optimistic, knowing what you know, that you don't take custody, that your code is protected? Did you feel pretty safe?
I thought we had a good shot. I thought we had the law on our side. And especially when we had the FinCEN revelation, I was like, well, this is phenomenal. We had a judge that I was happy with.
So Keonne and his legal team got to work to try to get the case thrown out.
We had spent the majority of the early part of the case, probably the first 6 to 8 months, preparing what's called a motion to dismiss indictment. And in a motion to dismiss indictment, you assume that everything the government has said in the indictment is true, and you just argue that even if it was true, it should be dismissed as a matter of law. And here's the reasons why. Here's Supreme Court precedent, here's appellate court precedent, here's all of the arguments. And we had put together a pretty wonderful motion to dismiss. We submitted that motion, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, we get a new judge for no reason, no reason that was explained to us. Most of the time, the judge sticks with you throughout the whole case.
But not for Keonne and Bill. They just swapped out judges and never told them why. It was pretty unusual, to say the least.
And the new judge was a pretty bad pick for us. She was the head of the criminal division of the Department of Justice before she became a judge. And she has a reputation for giving very harsh sentences. When we got there that day to argue the motions, that was the point of going to court that day, where my lawyer was going to get up and make his arguments for motion to dismiss. The government was going to get up and say why our arguments are wrong. When that day came, she didn't let us argue. She just said no. She just denied the motion and didn't give any reasoning, didn't write an opinion, didn't verbally state an opinion, just denied it on its face. And at that point, I think I realized this is not going to be fair. Myself and my co-defendant, Bill, we both kind of saw the writing on the wall here.
It became clear that if they went to trial with this judge, who was uninterested in hearing what they had to say, things would not go well for them.
It's really up to the judge what the jury gets to hear, right? So the jury's going to hear all of the, the things I said on Twitter about welcoming Russian oligarchs, but they're not going to be able to hear any of the 10 years worth of podcasts and interviews that I've done where I talk about why I built Samourai Wallet. They're not going to hear any of that. They're not going to hear that we had a lawyer who gave us legal advice and said what we were doing was legal. They're not going to hear that, right? They're only going to get to hear certain things. And so at that point, we're like, this is like walking into a fight with both hands tied behind our back. And if we lose, we're getting 25 years. We're going away for, the majority of my life. And Bill is 67 years old. It's not going to be good for him in there. So they offered us a deal. The deal they offered was they'd drop money laundering, right, which is the 20-year charge.
Wow.
They'd get rid of money laundering if only we pled to unlicensed money transmission, which is the charge they know that FinCEN didn't think applied, right? They know that, and the judge knows that, but no one cares. That's just, that's what the deal's going to be, and you're guilty of that, even though no one thought you were guilty. You're guilty of that.
Keonne and Bill were facing two paths. Prosecutors offered a plea deal for 5 years in prison, which is crazy to get sent to jail when you're pretty confident that you didn't do anything wrong. The other option was trial, but even with the FinCEN guidance in their favor, trial was an extremely high-stakes gamble. If they lost, they would be looking at 25 years in prison. But on top of that, New York Southern District escalated the pressure, layering on additional threats and consequences if they chose to fight.
They threatened us a number of ways to take the deal. They basically said, look, if you go to trial and lose, which we thought was pretty likely given this scenario, not only are they going to ask for the full 25 years, which they would have likely got with that judge, they're also going to submit a money judgment against us for the total amount of what they call illicit funds that went through Samourai Wallet, which was $237 million, and that we would be responsible for paying that. They knew full well we never had that money, right? They knew how Samourai Wallet worked. They knew that the users had that money, not us. So they were essentially saying, when you get out in 25 years, you'll owe us $287 million. And until you pay that, you're basically on like a house arrest until that's paid. Right? You can't travel, you can't leave the country, you have to check in all the time. That earns interest until it's paid off. So they're basically saying you're going to be in prison for life. If you don't take this deal, which after much deliberation, we ended up taking just to limit downside risk from 25 years to 5 years.
Wow. And so that's how it ended. You ended up taking a deal, 5 years in jail.
This judge was ready to put me away for a lot longer than 5 years. Like if she was able to, she would have, without question. To this point, 19 months in, I'm over $2.5 million in debt, and we never even got to trial. Like that, that was just to get to this point. So another 4 million or so for appeal. I just don't have that money. It's again, like I said, you're going against someone or something that just has unlimited resources, unlimited man hours, can throw everything they have at you, and you just don't. You don't have that capability. So at that point, we just decided, like, look, we'll take the deal. We'll do the 5 years. They won't do the 237 million. They'll only do 6.4 million, which is what they say we earned in fees over the 10-year period. So we'll do that, and that will be it. That will be done with it. So I owe the lawyers money.
So you're currently $2.5 million in debt.
Yeah. And then an additional $250,000, which the judge added as a fine at my sentencing.
Wow.
She didn't need to throw an additional $250,000 fine on top of the 6.4 million we had already forfeited. She knew full well that I didn't have that money, but she did.
It's just been one turn of the screw after another.
The day that you signed on to go to prison for 5 years, how were you feeling that day?
Pretty terrible. Pretty terrible. I told my lawyer, like I said, look, I don't want to stand up and lie to the court. Like, I don't want to get up there and say, I broke the law in this way, and it be a lie just to get a deal, right? So we worked pretty hard in writing a statement. They call it an allocution, that you have to get up and read or say to the judge to explain what you did to break the law. And, we went back and forth on it because I really wasn't interested in lying to the court and saying I did something that I didn't do. So I was happy once we got it dialed in with what I said, and I agreed with what I said. And I don't think anything I said in that statement was contrary to law, right? I said that users transmitted funds, and I said that I knew that criminals could use the software. All of that stuff was true. And that if that is against the law, then I guess I didn't understand the law, and so be it, whatever. But I told the truth in that courtroom, that's what was important to me. But obviously I wanted to fight. Obviously I wanted to get my day in court and argue my case to the jury. So on the one hand, it was like, I want to do these things that we're entitled to do and have the right to do. But on the other hand, none of those things work that way. Like I said, like, the jury doesn't hear everything, and the jury is not allowed to know certain things, and they're not going to get the full story. And the government is going to be there waving their hands around, doing anything they want, and we're going to be there with our hands tied behind our backs, not being able to say what we want to say. We have a judge who's not even giving opinions on our motions. We have a judge who's clearly hostile towards us. This isn't going to be a fair trial.
Fast forward to today, you're going to prison in a few days. How long is it until you go away?
I was ordered to report to self-surrender on December 19th. That's also kind of a messed up situation. Usually how it works is you go back home after your sentencing under the same conditions that you're currently in, your bail conditions. And you wait for a letter from the Bureau of Prisons, which can come anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks. And that letter will tell you you've been assigned to go to some prison on this date at this time. And then you go. That's pretty much how the process normally goes. So after the sentencing, my lawyer stood up and said, Judge, we would like Keonne to be able to self-surrender, and the government agrees. Then the government got up and said, yes, Your Honor, we agree.
But things didn't go to plan. It's not that the judge overruled the prosecution.
It would have been very odd if she remanded me over the consent of the government and, my counsel. So instead, she put this hard deadline on it. She said that if you don't get a designation from the Bureau of Prisons by December 19th, then you are to report to me and surrender yourself to me in the Southern District of New York. When I do that, I will be placed in the MDC, Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, where I will await my designation there. And that can take months, because you get designated, but you don't go the next day. The date you go could be months in the future. Knowing almost certainly that the Bureau of Prisons wasn't going to designate me by December 19th. And we had Thanksgiving coming up. The government shutdown was still going on at that time. No one was working. You can't have Christmas with your family for one final time. You're going to the MDC on December 19th. I would be put into one of the worst jails in the country while I wait for my designation. that was just another turn of the screw during that sentencing.
That detention center in Brooklyn is notorious. It's a maximum security facility.
There are certain judges in the Southern District of New York who refuse to send people to that jail because of how bad it is. My judge is not one of them. She was quite happy to send me there. It seemed very personal to her. I've never really seen a sentencing like that, where she was so hostile and so vicious to me. She really she had it in for me. She did not like me, and she was quite happy to give me whatever she could give me, the maximum penalty and whatever she could do. And that's what she ended up doing.
We just had Thanksgiving. Were you able to spend some time with your family then?
I was, yes, I was. At least we had one final holiday together.
There's a concept in criminal justice where the process itself is the punishment. Long before a verdict, the system can drain your money, your time, your health, and your reputation. Scholars like Malcolm M. Feely have written about it, and Kafka also explored how procedure, uncertainty, and institutional power can become the punishment itself. That matters for privacy, because privacy is not a crime. But if governments want to crush privacy anyway, they don't have to ban it or even win at trial. They can target the builders of privacy tools and let the machinery do the damage. This is the case with Ola Bini, a well-known privacy rights activist living in Ecuador. The government didn't need to prove a real crime to ruin his life. They arrested him and kept him trapped inside an endless legal process. For years, he's been unable to leave the country, forced to check in with prosecutors, cut off from normal banking, and is living under constant surveillance. His crime? They couldn't find any crime, so they focused on his use of privacy tools, such as encrypting his devices and using Tor as evidence that he must have been attempting to hack things. The way they saw it, if you protect people from surveillance, you must be dangerous. There's an entire war being waged against all kinds of privacy developers right now, with a wave of arrests. Roman Storm, Roman Semenoff, Roman Sterlingoff, Keonne and Bill, Ola, so many more. Not enough people even know that this is going on. This is how the war on privacy works in practice. You don't outlaw privacy outright. You target the people who build it, and the message becomes clear. Build tools that help ordinary people protect their privacy, and you may spend years fighting for your life in court, regardless of how the case ends. It creates a chilling effect, and the intent is that eventually people become too scared to build privacy tools.
If you do anything that they perceive as undermining their power, they will come after you with an iron fist.
So in that future scenario, when you feel you'll eventually need privacy and you'll just start using privacy tools then, those tools might no longer exist because no one is building them anymore.
Unfortunately, what we're seeing is this wave of criminalizing people in the privacy space. And generally, it's not for crimes that people have actually committed. It's because of this fundamental disagreement over whether or not privacy is a legitimate thing that individuals should have the right to.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what they'll do to the next person who has the audacity to create a tool that is useful and gives individual people, common people, the privacy that they actually have a right to. The most shocking thing is how much the government and these U.S. attorneys detest privacy and do not see it as anything other than clearly criminal.
It's possible we may lose the ability to have privacy forever. Governments are centralizing control over our digital lives, surveilling every single thing, having more access to deep personal insights about every individual, every innocent person on the planet than never before. Without privacy, we can't have human dignity.
I am with you in everything you said 100%. I think it's really just about small acts of resistance that small enclaves may form, right? Small enclaves of people who understand what's at stake and use privacy tools and use, a private cryptocurrency.
I don't see a future unless we protect the people who are building the tools that protect us. We're going to need these decentralized tools, and we're going to need the protection of privacy to use these decentralized tools. So I feel like we need more brave people.
Brave people who have the courage to use privacy tools even when governments don't want them to. And brave people who continue to build these tools for us, even though they're risking so much by doing so.
The government really wants to point to you and say, this is what happens to you. If you build this tooling, this is what's going to happen. And I hope there are some people out there who just refuse to listen to that. Maybe they're naive, and maybe they're stupid, and maybe they're just stubborn. But I selfishly hope there are people out there who persist and who just take extra care to protect their own privacy when they build these tools, because we need them. The entire world needs them.
Yeah, absolutely. And the great thing is they are out there, right? All of our code was open source and freely available for anyone to take and do what they wanted to with. We did not have a restrictive license on it. And within a month of our arrest, some group of people took our code and redeployed it and took Whirlpool and reactivated it. It's called Ashigaru. And the only difference is it only runs over Tor. And they don't have social media, and they're not on Telegram, and they're not anywhere, right? You just have to kind of learn about it and get it. And that's unfortunately what they have to do in order to safely run this software, which the government clearly believes is illegal. I think that's wonderful, and I salute and applaud those people.
Let's not feel overwhelmed and think that small acts can't make a difference. Small acts can change the course of history. So
Absolutely.
I think that as long as there are small abilities for us to have defiance and claim what's ours and maintain the normalcy of privacy by just daily acts of privacy, using any technology that we possibly can that gives us back our privacy, just engage with that. These small acts can actually make a huge difference and may mean the difference between us hurtling towards a surveillance dystopia and us actually being to, write a future where we have privacy and freedom still.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's what I think I mean by small acts of resistance in these enclaves. That's where you'll find some form of freedom and privacy. It's like those small acts, enough of them over a period of time, is guerrilla warfare. And that's how you win against an opponent who is completely and utterly stronger than you.
Yeah, for sure. I'm so sorry that this happened. It's appalling. And I don't think that people should accept it. I don't think that people should be okay with this. I think that people should be outraged that this happened, because when you twist the law to make people a criminal, it makes us realize that any of us can be made a criminal, taking enough things out of context. So I hope this unsettles people enough that they really start to think differently about the importance of privacy and what's currently at stake, and better understand the war against privacy that's currently going on.
Absolutely. And it is a war against privacy. People do need to understand that.
If we want to help fight the war on privacy, one thing that we can do is help support those building privacy tools. You can even help Keonne and Bill directly.
Visit billandkeonne.org, and then there's a link to two things. One is a petition where we're asking the president to consider pardoning Bill and myself. So please sign that. It's free. You can use a privacy email address and use your initials. You don't have to put your real name, but that would help just to show that there's demonstrable support. And then the second thing, if you feel up to it, there is a link to donate using Give, Send, Go right now. And that goes 50% to my wife, Lauren, and 50% to Bill's wife, Sabrina. So yes, please, at the very least, please sign the petition.
Unless we all galvanize and find a way to contribute to this fight, we may find that in the future, we no longer have the option of privacy anymore. As 2025 comes to a close, consider doing something that stands up for privacy. Your help may make the difference between whether we can keep privacy alive for future generations.